Are you ready to improve your English listening and speaking skills? Have you ever struggled to understand native speakers in real-life situations? Or maybe you want to express yourself more clearly and confidently in conversations. In today's episode, we are going to help you do just that. Welcome to the English Pod community. If you're new here, we upload daily episodes to help you improve your English naturally. In this episode, you will hear real-life stories with useful vocabulary and expressions. Listening to these stories will help you understand English in everyday situations. And by repeating the phrases, you will improve your speaking skills too. Let's start with a simple question. Have you ever had a moment when you misunderstood someone in English? Imagine ordering food at a restaurant, but the waiter doesn't understand what you're saying, or talking to a coworker and missing an important detail in the conversation. These situations can be frustrating, right? Let me tell you a personal story. A few years ago, my friend Daniel traveled to New York for the first time. He was excited but nervous about speaking English. On his first day, he walked into a small cafe to order breakfast. He wanted a croissant and a coffee, so he confidently said, "Can I have a croissant and a coffee, please?" But the cashier looked confused and asked, "Sorry, what was that?" Daniel repeated himself, but the cashier still didn't understand. He started feeling nervous. Then another customer stepped in and said, "He means a croissant." Suddenly, the cashier understood. This moment taught Daniel an important lesson. Sometimes, pronunciation makes a big difference in understanding. He realized that even though he knew the words, hearing them in real situations was different from learning them in a textbook. This is why listening is so important. The more you listen to real English, the more natural it becomes, and when you hear common phrases often, you will feel more confident using them yourself. Now let's talk about another real-life situation. My cousin Emma moved to Canada for work. She spoke English well, but when she arrived, she had trouble following conversations. People spoke quickly, used slang, and sometimes even interrupted each other. One day, she had an important meeting, and her manager asked, "Can you touch base with Mike about the new project?" Emma was confused. What did touch base mean? She thought, should I physically touch something? Later, she found out that touch base means to check in or discuss something briefly. This small phrase made a big difference in her understanding. After that, she started paying attention to idioms and expressions in conversations. So here's a tip for you. When you hear a new phrase, don't just memorize the meaning. Listen to how it's used in real conversations. Try repeating it aloud and using it in your own sentences. The more you practice, the more natural it will feel. Now let's think about your own experience. Have you ever been in a situation where you didn't understand something in English? Maybe you misheard a word, or maybe you weren't familiar with an expression. What did you do? How did you handle it? Imagine you are at a hotel, and the receptionist says, "Would you like a wake-up call?" If you're not familiar with this phrase, you might think they are asking if you need to wake up in life, but actually, A wake-up call means that the hotel will call your room in the morning to wake you up. These small but important moments happen all the time in real life. That's why listening to real conversations is the best way to improve your English. Let's do a quick practice exercise. I will say a short sentence, and I want you to repeat it after me. Ready? I'd like to order a coffee, please. Now you try. Great. Let's try another one. Could you repeat that, please? These are simple, polite phrases that you can use in everyday situations. The more you listen and repeat, the more confident you will feel. Now let's continue with another real-life story. A few years ago, my friend David moved to London for a new job. He was excited because it was his dream to work in an international company. He had studied English for years, but he had mostly learned from books and grammar exercises. He thought he was prepared, but when he arrived in London, he faced an unexpected challenge. Real-life conversations were much harder to understand than he expected. On his first day at work, his manager, Sarah, introduced him to the team. Everyone was friendly, but they spoke quickly and used a lot of expressions that he had never seen in textbooks. At lunchtime, one of his coworkers, Jake, said, "Hey David, let's grab a bite." David was confused. Grab what? What does that mean, he thought. He hesitated for a moment, then smiled and said, okay. He followed Jake to a nearby cafe, still unsure about what was happening. When they arrived, he finally understood. Grab a bite just means go and get something to eat. It was such a simple phrase, but because he had never heard it before in a real conversation, it completely confused him. That day, he realized that even though he knew a lot of English, he needed more practice listening to how people actually speak. David decided to make a plan. Every day, he started listening to English podcasts while walking to work. At lunchtime, instead of sitting alone, he made an effort to join conversations with his coworkers. At first, it was difficult. He didn't always understand everything, and sometimes he felt nervous. But instead of staying quiet, he started asking questions like, "Sorry, what does that mean?" or "Can you say that again?" His coworkers were happy to explain, and little by little, he got better at understanding them. One day, he was in a meeting, and his manager said, "All right, let's wrap things up." This time, instead of feeling lost, he knew exactly what it meant. Let's finish the meeting. He smiled to himself because just a few weeks earlier, he wouldn't have understood that phrase. This is an important lesson for anyone learning English. Sometimes the words themselves are not difficult, but the way people say them in real conversations can be different from what you see in textbooks. That's why listening practice is so important. The more you listen to natural English, the more comfortable you will feel when speaking. Now let's talk about another real-life situation. Imagine you're traveling to an English-speaking country for the first time. You arrive at the airport, and you need to go through immigration. The officer asks, "What's the purpose of your visit?" If you are not familiar with this phrase, you might feel nervous. Are they asking about your job? Your reason for traveling? What should you say? If you have practiced listening to common travel conversations, you will know that the correct answer is something simple like, I'm here for tourism, or I'm visiting family. A few months ago, my cousin Sophia traveled to Australia. She was confident in her English. But when she arrived at the airport, she got nervous. The immigration officer asked, "Do you have anything to declare?" She froze for a moment. The word declare sounded serious, like something legal or official. She thought, did I bring something illegal? Am I in trouble? She took a deep breath and asked, I'm sorry, could you repeat that? The officer calmly said, Are you carrying any food, alcohol, or large amounts of money? Now she understood, declare just means to report something. She smiled and said, No, I don't have anything to declare. The officer nodded and let her pass. Later, she laughed about the situation. She realized that the problem wasn't her English, it was just that she hadn't heard this phrase in real life before. This is why listening to natural conversations is so helpful. The more you hear these phrases in context, the easier it will be to understand and respond naturally. Now let's do a quick practice exercise. I'll say some common travel questions, and I want you to repeat after me. Where are you traveling from? Now you say it. Great. Here's another one. Do you have a return ticket? Try saying it aloud. The more you practice listening and speaking, the more confident you will feel in real situations. Now let's talk about another important moment when listening skills make a big difference, ordering food at a restaurant. Imagine you are in a busy cafe in London. You walk up to the counter, and the barista says, What can I get you? If you are prepared, you can simply say, I'd like a cappuccino, please. But what if they ask, for here or to go? If you are not familiar with this phrase, you might feel confused. A friend of mine, Mark, had this exact experience when he traveled to the US. He walked into a coffee shop and ordered a latte. The cashier asked, for here or to go? He hesitated, he had never heard this phrase before. He guessed that to go might mean takeaway, so he said, to go. Luckily, he was right, but at that moment, he felt nervous because he wasn't 100% sure. After that, he started listening carefully to how people ordered food and drinks. He noticed that in the US, people often say, Can I get a? Instead of I would like. He also learned that that'll be is a common way for cashiers to tell you the total price. For example, the cashier might say, That'll be $5.50. If you don't know this phrase, you might not realize they are telling you the price. But once you hear it a few times, it becomes natural. This is why real-life listening is so important. The more you hear these phrases, the more confident you will feel when speaking. Now let's practice. I'll say some common phrases you might hear in a cafe. Repeat after me, what can I get for you? Now you say it. Great. Here's another one. That'll be $5.50. Try saying it aloud. When you listen and repeat, your brain gets used to the sounds of English, and speaking becomes easier. Now let's continue with another important area where listening and speaking skills make a big difference, making small talk. Small talk is the kind of casual conversation you have with people in everyday situations, like when you meet someone new or when you're waiting for a bus. It's a skill that can feel difficult at first, but once you practice it, it can become one of the most valuable ways to improve your fluency in English. A few months ago, my friend Maria, who is from Spain, moved to an English-speaking city for work. She had studied English for many years, but she was nervous about speaking with strangers, especially when it came to making small talk. She thought that small talk wasn't as important as knowing grammar and vocabulary, but she quickly realized that it was a huge part of everyday life. Her first week at work was a bit stressful. At lunch, her colleague John invited her to join him and a few others in the break room. Maria was unsure what to say. She didn't know these people very well, and she was afraid that she might say the wrong thing. When they sat down to eat, John asked, "So, how was your weekend?" Maria froze for a second. In Spain, people often talk about what they did over the weekend, but she didn't know if she should share something personal or keep it simple. She finally decided to say, "It was good. I went to the park with my family." That was a safe answer, right? But then John smiled and said, "That sounds nice. What did you do at the park?" Maria realized that this was just like asking someone about their hobbies or interests. It wasn't a deep conversation, it was just a way to connect. Over the next few days, she became more comfortable with small talk. She started asking her coworkers questions like, "Do you like the weather here?" or "What do you like to do in your free time?" She was surprised at how easy it became. Through these simple conversations, Maria realized something very important. Small talk isn't just about talking, it's about connecting with people. The more you practice, the more natural it becomes, and when you listen carefully, you learn useful phrases and expressions that help you speak more naturally. For example, when John asked about Maria's weekend, he didn't say, "What did you do over the weekend?" Instead, he said, "How was your weekend?" This is a very common way to ask about someone's weekend or time off. When you hear these expressions in real conversations, they stick with you, and soon you'll be able to use them yourself. Here's another tip. When it comes to small talk, people often don't expect long answers. It's more about giving a simple response and asking the other person about their experience. When you're practicing, remember to listen for these small cues. For instance, someone might say, "The weekend was great, but I wish it was longer." This shows that they're offering a bit of information. But they're also leaving space for you to share your experience too. Maria started using this technique, and she found that it helped her speak more confidently. Instead of worrying about saying something perfect, she focused on the flow of the conversation and learning new phrases. One of the phrases that Maria picked up during her first few weeks was, "What about you?" When someone asked her how her weekend was, she learned that it's perfectly natural to respond with, "It was good, thanks." What about you? These small, everyday conversations will help you improve your listening and speaking skills. And you'll start to feel more confident in social situations. This is something that can't be learned from a textbook alone. It's about engaging with people, paying attention to how they speak, and practicing how you respond. Now let's shift gears and talk about something else that can challenge English learners: understanding different accents. When you're learning English, you might find it hard to understand different accents or regional variations. Whether it's British, American, Australian, or even different accents within the same country. Understanding accents is an important part of mastering English. Let's take a step back for a moment. I want you to think about your own journey in learning English. Have you had moments where you felt unsure or confused in a conversation? Maybe you were listening to someone speaking quickly, or you didn't understand a slang word or idiom. It happens to all of us, and it's part of the process of learning a new language. The key is not to give up, keep practicing, and keep engaging with real conversations. Every time you listen, you get a little bit better. Remember, English isn't just something you learn from books, it's something you experience through conversations, stories, and real-life situations. Whether it's making small talk with a friend, ordering food at a restaurant, or simply listening to someone tell a story, every moment is a chance to improve. By listening to real stories, you start to notice the natural rhythm of English. You learn how words flow together in sentences, how people express themselves in different situations, and how to use the right phrases at the right time. This is the kind of practice that will help you sound more natural when you speak. When I was visiting New York a couple of years ago, I got a little lost while walking around the city. I decided to stop and ask someone for directions. I approached a friendly-looking person and said, "Excuse me, can you tell me how to get to the subway?" He looked at me and said, "Yeah, just go straight ahead, take a left at the lights, and you'll see it on your right." That was simple enough, but I was surprised at how fast he spoke. He didn't slow down to explain, and I had to listen very carefully to catch all the details. In that moment, I realized how important it is to focus not just on the words, but on how they're delivered. Native speakers often speak quickly, and they use slang or expressions that might not be in your textbooks. For instance, when the man said, "Take a left at the lights," he was using a common phrase to mean turn left at the traffic lights. It was casual and quick, but once I understood the phrase, I realized how useful it would be to remember for future conversations. To improve your skills in asking for directions, start by learning common phrases and expressions. You'll often hear people say things like "go straight," "turn left," "it's around the corner," and "it's just a few blocks away." These are all useful phrases that you'll encounter frequently. When you're practicing, listen to how native speakers use these phrases in everyday situations. By listening to podcasts, YouTube videos, or watching movies, you'll be able to hear these expressions in different contexts. After practicing asking for directions in English, try to imagine yourself in the situation. Maybe you're lost in a new city and you need to ask for help. Practicing these types of conversations in your mind, or even aloud, will help you prepare for when you're actually in the situation. Let's move on to another practical area that will help you with your listening and speaking, handling problems and complaints in English. This is another important part of everyday life. Whether it's at a store, in a hotel, or during an interaction with customer service, knowing how to express your problems clearly is essential. I had an experience a few months ago when I was staying in a hotel during a business trip. I checked into my room, but when I tried to use the Wi-Fi, it wasn't working. I called the front desk and said, "Excuse me, the Wi-Fi isn't working in my room. Could you help me?" The receptionist on the phone replied, "I'm sorry to hear that. Let me check and see what I can do." After a few minutes, she called me back and explained that the Wi-Fi was down in the building, but they would be fixing it soon. She was polite and apologetic, which made me feel better. In this situation, I learned a few things that I want to share with you. First, when you have a problem, it's important to remain calm and explain the issue clearly. You can use phrases like, "I'm having trouble with," or "there's a problem with," to describe the situation. Second, if someone else is trying to solve the problem for you, you should listen carefully to their response. They might use phrases like, "Let me check on that for you," or "I'll have someone take care of it." These are polite ways to show that they're taking your complaint seriously. By listening to real-life situations like these, you'll be better prepared to handle problems in English. The more you practice these types of conversations, the easier it will be to stay calm and confident when something goes wrong. And remember, don't be afraid to ask for clarification if you don't understand something. You can always say, "Could you explain that again?" or "I didn't quite catch that, could you repeat it?" Now let's move on to a different but equally important topic, making phone calls in English. For many learners, phone calls can feel even more challenging than face-to-face conversations because you can't see the other person's facial expressions or gestures. By the end of the conversation, she felt much more confident about making appointments in English. Now let's talk about listening in group conversations. This can be especially tricky because multiple people may be speaking at once, and they might interrupt each other or change topics quickly. In these situations, it's important to focus on the main idea rather than trying to catch every single word. I remember attending a dinner party with friends from different countries. The conversation was lively, and people were telling jokes, sharing stories, and talking over each other. At first, it was hard to keep up, but I decided to just focus on the key points of each story instead of worrying about every detail. I also listened for repeated words or phrases to help me understand the topic. If you ever find yourself lost in a group conversation, it's okay to ask someone quietly, "What are you talking about?" or "Could you explain that?" Most people are happy to include you in the conversation once they realize you're trying to follow along. Another strategy is to join smaller side conversations during group events. It's easier to listen and respond when there are fewer people speaking, and it gives you more chances to practice without feeling overwhelmed. Finally, remember that listening is a skill that improves over time. The more you expose yourself to English, whether through podcasts, TV shows, or real-life conversations, the easier it becomes to follow along, even in challenging situations. The key is consistency. Just like learning any other skill, daily practice will help you progress faster. Even 10 to 15 minutes of focused listening each day can make a big difference in your ability to understand and respond naturally. Now let's talk about another useful skill, listening for details in announcements. This can be especially important when you're traveling, attending events, or using public transportation. In these situations, the information is often given quickly, so you need to be able to catch the key details. For example, imagine you are at a train station in London. You hear an announcement: the 10:15 train to Manchester is now departing from platform 7. If you're not paying attention, you might miss the time, the destination, or the platform number. That's why it's important to focus on the keywords in announcements, words like times, numbers, destinations, and instructions. A few years ago, my friend Rachel traveled to Japan. She told me that train announcements there were very fast, and sometimes in Japanese first, then in English. At first, she found it overwhelming, but she developed a strategy. She focused on listening for numbers and place names. This helped her catch the most important information, even if she didn't understand every single word. You can practice this skill by listening to real announcements online. Many train stations, airports, and even museums have recordings you can listen to. Try playing them and writing down the important details. Over time, you'll get faster at catching this information. Another place where listening carefully is essential is in classrooms or meetings. If you are studying in English or working in an English-speaking environment, you'll often need to take notes while listening. This means focusing on the main ideas and writing them down quickly. Let's take a classroom example. Imagine your teacher says, "For next week's assignment, please read chapters 4 and 5, answer the questions at the end of each chapter, and prepare a short presentation." If you only hear part of that, you might miss an important instruction. That's why it's useful to develop note-taking skills. One tip is to use abbreviations and symbols when writing notes. For example, instead of writing "Please read chapters 4 and 5, you could write "Read ch4 plus 5. This saves time and allows you to keep listening without missing anything. Listening for tone and emotion is another advanced skill that can make a big difference in understanding English. Sometimes, the way something is said is just as important as the words themselves. For example, if someone says, "That's interesting," in a flat voice, they might not really mean it. But if they say it with energy and a smile, they probably mean it sincerely. When you listen, pay attention to changes in pitch, speed, and volume. These can give you clues about the speaker's emotions and intentions. Movies and TV shows are great for practicing this skill because actors use tone to express a wide range of feelings. Now let's wrap up today's discussion with some practical steps you can take to improve your listening skills. Listen every day. Even 10 minutes of focused listening can make a difference. Repeat what you hear. This helps you practice pronunciation and rhythm. Focus on keywords. Don't try to understand every single word, catch the most important ones. Practice with different accents. This will prepare you for real-life conversations. Stay curious. When you hear a new phrase, look it up and practice using it. Remember, listening is the foundation of good communication. The more you listen, the more natural your speaking will become. So make listening a regular part of your English learning routine, and you'll see improvement faster than you think. Now, let's shift our focus to something equally important, understanding cultural references when listening to English. Sometimes, even if you understand every single word, the meaning can still be unclear because it's tied to a cultural idea or shared experience. For example, if someone says, "It's my Achilles heel," they are not talking about their actual heel. They are referring to a weakness. This comes from an ancient Greek myth. Similarly, if someone says, "We need to hit the ground running," it means to start working immediately and effectively, not literally running on the ground. Cultural references like these are common in everyday speech, movies, TV shows, and even in the workplace. To understand them, it helps to watch English content from different sources, such as news reports, sitcoms, and interviews. Pay attention to situations where people laugh or react strongly. This often means there's a reference or inside joke. One strategy is to keep a cultural notes section in your notebook. Whenever you hear an unfamiliar expression, write it down along with the context. Later, you can research its origin and meaning. Over time, you'll start to recognize these references more easily. Let me share a story about my student, Priya, from India. When she first started working in the UK, her colleagues often used phrases from British TV shows. At first, she felt left out because she didn't understand the jokes. Instead of ignoring them, she began watching the shows her colleagues mentioned. Within a few months, she was able to join in the conversations, and even make her own cultural references. Another advanced listening skill is recognizing implied meaning, when someone doesn't say something directly, but hints at it. For example, if your manager says, "It might be a good idea to double-check that report," they probably mean, "There's something wrong, fix it." Understanding these indirect messages comes with experience and careful listening to tone, choice of words, and timing. A useful way to practice is by watching interviews or talk shows where guests sometimes avoid answering a question directly. Pay attention to how they change the subject or use certain phrases to avoid giving a clear answer. Let's also talk about listening for instructions in professional or formal settings. In business meetings, instructions may not always be obvious. They can be hidden in polite suggestions. For instance, perhaps we could look at this again next week really means, "We are not making a decision now, let's discuss it later." In these cases, it helps to confirm what you've heard by repeating it back. You can say, "So, just to confirm, we'll revisit this next week?" This not only ensures you understood correctly but also shows that you're paying attention. Finally, remember that listening is not a passive skill, it's active. You are not just hearing sounds, You are interpreting meaning, catching details, and connecting ideas. The more actively you listen, the more confident you will become in all types of English conversations. Throughout this lesson, we've explored a wide range of techniques, listening to real-life conversations, understanding different accents, catching key phrases, dealing with problems, handling group discussions, following announcements, picking up on tone and emotion, and even understanding cultural references and implied meanings. Each of these skills works together to make you a more confident and capable listener. The truth is, listening in English is not something you master overnight, it's something you grow into through constant practice. It's like building a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it becomes. One thing I want you to remember is this: every single day gives you an opportunity to improve. It doesn't have to be hours of study. Even 10 or 15 minutes of focused listening, whether it's a podcast, a YouTube video, a news segment, or a conversation, will help you progress. The key is to listen actively. Don't just let the sounds wash over you. Focus, think, and try to connect what you hear to what you already know. Also, don't be afraid of mistakes or misunderstandings. They are not signs of failure, they are signs of growth. Every time you mishear something and then learn the correct meaning, you've just taken another step toward fluency. Make listening a part of your daily life. Listen to music in English while you cook. Watch a TV show in English before bed. Put on a podcast while you go for a walk. These small habits will add up to big improvements over time. And most importantly, enjoy the process. English is not just a language, it's a bridge to new cultures, friendships, and opportunities. The more you listen, the more you'll understand, not just words, but the people and stories behind them. So keep listening, keep learning, and keep going. Your journey to becoming a confident English speaker is already well underway, and I can't wait to see how far you'll go.